Wisconsin Eye's 2014 election coverage is brought to you by the Wisconsin Hospital Association. For over 90 years, a valued voice for Wisconsin hospitals, supporting high-quality, high-value care in communities like yours.
Wisconsin Eyes at the Milwaukee Public Library, interviewing candidates in the 2014 elections. We're interviewing Mr. Dan Sebring of Milwaukee. He's the Republican candidate in the 4th Congressional District. Dan, welcome back to Wisconsin Eye.
Thanks for having me.
And just a programming note, Wisconsin Eye appreciates the support of the Wisconsin Hospital Association, which represents 139 hospitals and health systems, for making these candidate interviews possible. This is which number run, sir, in the 4th?
Number 4 for me.
Number 4.
Number 4.
Okay, and how does this one feel better than the other 3?
It feels a lot better, especially after the primary. Not so much because of the margin that I won the primary by,
right,
but the things that were revealed to us because of the number of people that were crossing over to vote for the sheriff.
Well, this is fascinating. So what did you learn about that from now the incumbent who you're challenging, Gwen Moore, she had a primary, former State Senator Gary George, and the results told you what, sir?
Well, what the results told us was that it turns out in the 4th District, 40,000 people who voted for the sheriff did not vote in the 4th District primary. Also, you mentioned Gary George. He got 20,000 plus votes. And roughly 4,000 people actually voted in the GOP primary. So that's, give or take, 64,000 people who either would not or did not vote for Gwen Moore. Her numbers in the primary results were 52,380.
Okay.
So I believe that tells me that it is possible that a Republican can win in the 4th District.
Well, and the number one issue for you, sir, is what?
Well, jobs and the economy.
Jobs and the economy. And what would you do as one member of Congress to help the 4th District here in Milwaukee?
Well, we need to get the government out of business's way. Again, we have the 4th District. I would like to have that declared, the entire district, a federal enterprise zone where we would provide tax incentives for businesses to come to the district and help that way. Also, we need to be able to provide those business owners and those companies with an educated workforce that is ready to go to work.
Now, you're a small businessman of your own, correct?
Yes, I am.
How would the enterprise zone work? Within that, you said, that would there be a cut in taxes paid by those? And what's the incentive for businesses to set up shop or to hire in a enterprise zone, Dan?
Well, there's a number of different things that could be done. We could, the government could co-pay wages for people that are in training. We could provide tax incentives to increase police presence, to maintain the infrastructure, to fix the roads, to fix all those potholes. So there's a number of things that can be done in that respect.
Is this a model that exists anywhere else in the nation?
Certainly, this is not something that is new. This has been around for a long time, and it just does not exist in Wisconsin or in the 4th District.
Which regions have it?
Honestly, at this point, I don't recall exactly, but there are other parts of the country that have participated in this program.
You've seen the polls. The approval rating for Congress is between 8 and 15%. How would you, if you were a member of the U.S. House, work to improve that, sir?
Well, I wouldn't worry about what the polls are saying about the approval of Congress. I would just set about doing the work that Congress is supposed to be doing.
Okay. And the number one job that they're not doing is what?
Well, jobs in the economy.
Okay, coming back to that. Coming back to that. What about the international turmoil? Lessons that you've learned from Iraq and Hamas and Palestine and the Ukraine. When should America use that term, boots on the ground, internationally?
I think when we're asked,
okay,
when there's a declaration of war,
okay,
particularly in Israel, I would have to say that if Israel is asking us to participate in their efforts in whatever manner that might be, as our ally, we're obligated to step up and help them out.
What about this latest terrorist group that's so lethal, ISIS? Do you think we should put boots on the ground in Iraq and maybe cross the border to Syria to fight them?
This is a very, very serious affair with these guys over here, and my experience tells me that the only way that we're going to truly get rid of them is to step in and get rid of them. That means bombing. If that means boots on the ground, then that means boots on the ground. This is probably the #1 threat right now that America faces. It's a very serious threat.
So if you were a member of Congress and the President asked for what amounts to a declaration of war to fight ISIS, how would you vote?
I would vote in favor of that.
You would?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Okay. Changing the subject to a domestic issue. On your website, you talk a lot about the Affordable Care Act. You don't think it's a very good thing, do you?
I do not.
And so you would work to do what?
I would work to repeal and replace the Affordable Care Act with the it escapes me at the moment, the American Healthcare Reform Act.
Okay.
I don't know the number of the bill, but the bill has already been written. It's already been proposed, and we just need to get that out to the House floor and get it voted on.
What's wrong with the Affordable Care Act, Dan?
Well, it's a comprehensive reform that has so many hidden aspects to it. Like Nancy Pelosi said once, we have to pass it to find out what's in it, and we're finding out what's in it, and there's plenty of it that is actually bad for America, that we can't fix it. It's too broken. We need to start over.
Have you seen any direct impact on the state of Wisconsin of the Affordable Care Act?
Well, certainly I've talked to plenty of people whose insurance premiums, rather than going down, have gone up. Some of them have doubled and tripled. I've talked to people whose hours have been cut at their job. I've talked to people who have lost their job because of Obamacare. And there's a lot of direct effect going on right here in Wisconsin.
Okay. What about the provisions, no pre-existing conditions, no limit on medical coverage, and young adults can stay with their parents until they're 26?
And those aspects of Obamacare are included in the American Healthcare Reform Act. So they would be sticking around.
Okay. Congress recently passed a very temporary way to pay for our transportation needs and highways, pension smoothing, but it's a very short-term plan. What do you think is a permanent way to pay for our highways? You talked about the potholes earlier, but...
Right. Well, again, this all goes back to jobs and the economy. For us to have the money to be able to do these things that need to be done, we need to get more people paying into the pot. That means putting people to work.
Okay. Well, do you think we need to raise the national gas tax to assure stable funding?
I would be opposed to that. We would have to find another way.
Okay.
But raising taxes is not something I'm going to go along with.
Okay. A couple questions on the environment. The Obama administration recently proposed carbon emission limits. Do you support those? Have you studied those?
No.
Why?
It's too expensive at the moment. We're placing an additional burden on business, on energy providers, on consumers, and right now is not the time to place an additional burden on anyone, whether it's private enterprise or a private citizen. It's just not the time to do something like that, and I would be totally against that.
They argue that we need it for climate change. How big of a threat is climate change?
Well, frankly, I have to go along with the scientists, and there's many, many scientists that say that climate change simply doesn't exist.
Okay. Your position on the Keystone Pipeline?
We got to have the Keystone Pipeline. That's very important to our financial future as well as our energy future. There are several companies, 3 or 4, as I recall, that pipeline companies right here in the 4th District that will be manufacturing the pipe for that pipeline. And it's going to provide a lot of jobs, and it's going to be long term.
Immigration reform. That's a bill that Congress couldn't act on. What provisions would you like to see in any type of a bill on that subject?
Well, before we do anything else where immigration reform is concerned, we have to secure the border. That's an absolute must. And once that is taken care of, then we can go ahead and see what we can do about the rest of those aspects of immigration reform. I would be opposed to any kind of comprehensive reform because, again, like Obamacare, you can hide stuff in there. So we need to take this, one issue, one bill, one step at a time.
Should the 57,000 children who crossed into the U.S. from, largely El Salvador, Guatemala, should they all be sent back to their country of origin?
I believe they should be repatriated, yes.
Okay. Any long-term change on that, on the laws on this issue? Should it include amnesty for those that are here illegally?
I would be opposed to amnesty. There should be, I believe, some type of legal residency after you sift through the people and find out, who, we need to get the criminals weeded out and that type of thing. But people who have been here for a certain period of time, whether it's 5 or 7 years, and they've managed to stay out of trouble and they've paid their taxes and they've got a job, and those people should have legal residence, but certainly not citizenship.
Should they pay a fee for that legal status?
Certainly, yeah. They would have to make sure that they recognize that they did wrong by coming here illegally, and make sure that, again, that their taxes are paid, and they would have to pay a fee for violating our border.
One issue that emerged since the last time you ran for the 4th is the disclosures by Edward Snowden about the National Security Agency. Did the NSA break the law, do you believe, in terms of collecting data?
That's kind of a sticky wicket for me. When I was in the Navy, I served on the Chief of Naval Operations Intelligence Staff, and we worked very closely with the NSA, and there's a lot of things that I simply can't talk about, and that's one of them.
But did the Snowden disclosures, anything in there surprise you, given your service in the military?
Yes. I was surprised at how deep it goes. And certainly I don't think the NSA or anyone else should be spying on Americans. So there's stuff going on that needed to be revealed. At the same time, the NSA provides a necessary service to...
Has the NSA kept citizens like you and I safer and prevented future terrorist attacks?
Absolutely.
Okay. Congressman Sensenbrenner has offered a bill that would change their data collection practices. Do you have enough knowledge of that bill to know whether it's needed and you would support it?
I have read a summary of that bill, and I would support it.
Okay. Lost in some of the debate as we focus on some of these international issues is the fact that both Medicare and Social Security are still on track to go broke. How would you fix them?
Again, we have to get more people back to work and get more people paying into the pot so that we can keep it afloat till we find out exactly what it's going to take to straighten it out. It's going to be several years before it's actually in trouble, and they've been saying for years and years and years that it's going to go broke, it's going to go broke, and I'm not arguing that it's not going to go broke if we don't do anything. But for right now, what we need to do is get more people back to work so that there's more people paying into the pot, and then we'll figure out what it's going to take to look long-term, what it's going to take to update that and make sure that it's there for the future.
Campaign finance. In the wake of the Citizens United ruling in 2010, there's just been an explosion of third-party groups spending hundreds of millions. Some want a constitutional amendment to overturn the Citizens United ruling. Your position on that?
I would be opposed to a constitutional amendment to overturn the Citizens United ruling. These third parties are now speaking up, whereas prior to the Citizens United ruling, only unions were speaking out in that manner, and the third parties are speaking up for private enterprise. They're speaking up for private citizens who don't have the voice prior to the Citizens United decision. So it's leveling the playing field, and it needs to stay.
Okay. But how's your own campaign finance going up against someone who's now a member of the U.S. House?
Well, she has a tremendous advantage over me being on the House Finance Committee.
Yes.
A lot of people want her ear, and a lot of people are contributing to her campaign fund. We are pretty much in the same boat that we've always been in, trying to collect what we can collect from within the 4th District. And if you looked at what she's raised from within the district compared to what we've raised from within the district, it's been pretty much the same numbers over the last few elections that we've participated in. And we're pretty much on track to be doing the same thing. I'm hoping that the results from the primary that we talked about earlier will help me make the argument that I can win this district, and people will step up and make campaign contributions. In the meantime, we're pedaling as fast as we can.
I understand. Some American companies are exploring reorganizing in foreign countries to avoid taxation. This week, Burger King announced that it's going to buy Tim Hortons to set up its corporate headquarters in Canada, which has a lower corporate tax rate. Should American corporations be prohibited from doing that just to save taxes, Dan?
Well, no. What we should do is lower our tax rates to keep the businesses here. They're not doing anything illegal, and this is something that is the government's own doing. They're forcing these businesses to do this. I'm sure they didn't want to. I know I wouldn't want to move my business to some other country just so I wouldn't have to pay the taxes. I'm sure they want to stay here, but you have to do what makes business sense.
Do I have it right on your website? You say you'd like to cut the corporate tax rate to 12.5%?
That's correct.
Okay. And then for citizens, you'd like to see a 15% flat tax? Why?
Well, either the flat tax or the fair tax, but we have seen with all the trouble the IRS is having right now, that the IRS, in my opinion, needs to be abolished, and we have to replace it with something.
Okay.
So a flat tax is simple, it's easy, or the fair tax. So that's why we're talking flat tax and fair tax.
On your campaign website, you are a champion of the Second Amendment, the right to keep and bear arms. Yet you have these tragic incidents in the city of Milwaukee, which you want to represent, in which Sierra Guyton is killed in a crossfire. How do you balance the use of weapons by criminals against the Second Amendment, Dan?
Well, the criminals aren't going to obey the law. They're criminals. If we were to ban handguns or firearms totally in the 4th District or in the city of Milwaukee, that would not stop the criminals from getting guns.
Okay.
And disarming the private citizen, the law-abiding citizen, is not going to stop the crime.
What's a better answer then for the violence that unfortunately the city of Milwaukee sees?
Like a lot of things, we need to enforce the laws that are already on the books. A lot of these criminals are repeat offenders who have gotten off light on previous offenses or been released early, and they've gone out and not only repeated, but they've increased the severity of the crimes that they're committing. So we need to be a little tougher in that respect.
Do you agree with Sheriff Clark when he says the first response of someone who feels in danger should be get trained in using your own weapon prior to calling 911?
Well, that's going to be the case a lot of the times. I think probably the most important human right is that of self-preservation. And if that's what it takes, that's what it takes. You can ask anybody that's called 911. Sometimes it takes 3 or 4 minutes just to get an operator on the line. And if you feel that your life is in danger, you have every right to defend yourself and your family.
Okay. If it were up to you, how would you help Milwaukee Public Schools do a better job training this city's young children, sir?
Well, that's another really difficult question. We have to look at what are the choice schools doing. The choice schools seem to be doing a very, very good job, and we need to expand on the choice schools. But we can't throw out the public school system. We have to find out what are the choice schools doing right that the public schools are not, and have the public school system emulate that.
Some people say the emergence of choice and voucher schools amounts to a second type of school system, and that they shouldn't have to pay for that secondary type of school system. Do you have a response?
You know what? I don't have any children, and I pay for people's educations. I have no problem whatsoever with parents deciding what school their children go to. I think they have every right to pick.
Okay. Finally, summarize the differences in this new campaign against Gwen Moore. Summarize the differences between you and she.
Well, again, looking at the results of the primary election, I think those numbers clearly demonstrate that a Republican can win in the 4th District. And Gwen Moore and I are pretty much diametrically opposed on almost every issue. Okay. She believes that the government should be in charge of pretty much everything, and I think that the government should be limited. And those limitations are spelled out in the United States Constitution. Recently, she co-signed a letter to the President of the United States asking him to appoint a law enforcement czar to oversee state and municipal law enforcement. Now, that's a federal government intrusion into our everyday lives that I am completely and totally opposed to. And I think that is the biggest difference, where she, in my opinion, believes that the government should be in control of as much of our lives as possible, and I believe that the government should be out of our business and in control of as little as possible and still be able to meet its obligations as our federal government.
Okay. Any other issue? I've asked you about several issues. Any other I haven't brought up that you want to bring up now in terms of
well, I'm here to answer your questions.
Okay.
So.
Okay. Very good. All right. Well, at this point, I'm out of questions, so I want to thank Dan Sebring of Milwaukee. He's a Republican candidate in the 4th Congressional District. Dan, welcome back to Wisconsin Eye. Nice to see you again, sir.
You too. Thank you.
Thank you.